All right, what group are we looking at here in lesson 8? The flappers, yeah. New style. Let's hang in here, please, thanks. New style, bobbed hair, short dresses. What dance are they doing? Charleston, very good. Charleston. So, post-World War I, listen up. World War I devastated Europe, obviously plunges Europe into a pretty severe economic crisis. I want you to keep in mind that post-World War I is not like post-World War II. The only people that we are providing aid for are the victors. So there's aid to Belgium, there's aid to the Netherlands. There's not any aid to Germany. There's not any aid to any of the Central Powers, right? Do keep in mind, the United States is going to have a boom time, but not without a little sharp recession in the post-war era. You could really categorize this 1919 to 1921. It's at its peak in the 20s. And really, something to keep in mind is anytime you're in a major war in the post-war era, you got to deal with what is called surplus. What is surplus? Too much, right? So, what do they do with the surplus? They sell it. Or they do what with it? These are good ideas, but they actually do the opposite. They destroy it. They either sell it or destroy it. So surplus is an issue in the post-World War I era. We'll talk about surplus in the post-World War II era as well. Remember, women gain rights to vote, but there's also some social and societal expectations that change for women, not dramatically, but significantly. And that is, women win wars. Thanks. Women win wars, and they're providing the wartime production here. And when they come out of the war, they're producing consumer goods, right? So it's not like everybody gets back from World War I and they're like, oh, hey, all the ladies need to go back home, your job's done. Women are still going to remain in business and manufacturing. I want this to be really clear though. Can we like pull it together? Thank you. I'll give you time to catch up. I appreciate it. Thank you. I want to be clear. Everything is segregated. Segregated between African American men and African American and white men, African American women, white women. So it's segregated in multiple parts in the labor industry. There's a really important individual we're going to talk a little bit about later. His name is Andrew Mellon. He served as Secretary of State under Harding and under Coolidge. He is a laissez-faire guy. He wants to see consumer production skyrocket, and that's going to take place. So this is a boom time, the 1920s. And what we're looking at here really is a real sad chapter for African Americans because Jim Crow just gets worse instead of it getting better. So there are gains in the progressive era, but African Americans have very limited access to those gains and those opportunities. So again, that leads to what Katia brought up, the Great Migration, right? Large numbers of African Americans in the pre-war and the post-war era moving to northern cities, western areas for opportunity. Tragically, Jim Crow follows, right? So the stock market's booming. We'll talk about that today. Hollywood's buzzing. We're going to talk about Hollywood getting on the map here for filmmaking. New ideas and new styles like the flapper that we just took a look at. That's all going to come about during this era. Republicans take back the White House. Why does Wilson not run again? He's sick. Exactly. He suffered a debilitating stroke. He's not in a position to run for re-election. So Henry Cabot Lodge, his nemesis, and again, Wilson's going to die not long after he leaves office. Remember his wife Edith, she gets things going. She could be considered like the first female president. She ran the White House in the last year of his time in office. Bless you. Henry Cabot Lodge, Wilson's nemesis, anti-league guy, isolation guy, return to normalcy guy, and anti-Versailles Treaty guy, he is going to push for this return to normalcy. The guy that they are going to choose is a senator from Ohio who's a big business guy. His name is Warren G. Harding. Harding, this is a very bizarre election, is going to be challenging the governor of Ohio, James M. Cox. He will defeat Cox in a landslide with that campaign slogan of a return to normalcy. Isolationism, and what policy in economics? What policy in economics? Please pay attention. Laissez-faire, very good. Laissez-faire economics. Hands off, right? So Harding and his vice president, Calvin Coolidge, they are laissez-faire guys. They are backed by big business. Harding's greatest achievement? Washington Naval Conference. This is the first big disarmament conference in the post-World War I era. And it's a sideshow of the League of Nations. And there's one big-time country that does not get invited. Any guesses? That's a really good guess, but that's not it. Well, America sponsors the thing. Yes, the Soviets. Soviets are not invited to the party. This is going to lead to a little bit of tension moving forward. But he is shrouded in scandal. He has a bunch of extramarital affairs that are going on. He's rumored to have had a child with one of his mistresses. He is a married man. All right, this is not going over well in the press. As you can imagine, they're eating this up, and they are publishing story after story after story. But the bigger problem than his adulterous affairs is the group that he surrounds himself with. They're called the Ohio Gang. They're his advisors, they're his cabinet members, and everybody from his attorney general to his secretary of Interior, Albert Fall, they are involved in all types of scandals where they're taking bribes and there's a lot of corruption. It's like this old spoil system thing we've talked about in the past. The greatest scandal, and still to this day, one of the greatest scandals in American history, political scandals, is Teapot Dome. Teapot Dome is an area in Wyoming that underneath the government-owned land is a lake of oil. Interior Secretary Albert Fall thinks it's a good idea to dish out these land grants and leases to companies without having to compete. There's no laws against it, but there's one problem. What's Albert Fall doing with the money? He's pocketing, right? So Fall ends up not only getting indicted, charged, is removed from office, but he serves a year in jail. He's our only cabinet member to date that served jail time for corruption in office. We talked about the Grant administration as well with Credit Mobilier. Here's the issue for Harding. Harding it's tough for the historians who love Harding and the historians who loathe Harding, because Harding doesn't live to defend himself. We don't know whether he knew anything about Teapot Dome because he dropped dead in office in 1923. Calvin Coolidge comes on the scene as vice president, Silent Cal. Silent Cal is a really great name for him. He once was entertaining at a White House dinner, and the woman sitting next to him said, "Mr. President, I bet by the end of dinner I will have you say more than 2 words." At the end of dinner, he looks at her and says, "You lose." Very soft-spoken man, big-time laissez-faire. He runs for re-election. Stay cool with Coolidge. Treasury Secretary Andrew Mellon, during his time in office, this is a big business president. But I want you to think about something with these guys. It's a double-edged sword. On the one side, we don't see the economic growth in the 1920s without them. On the flip side of the sword, or the coin, or whatever you want to say, we don't see the market crash occur without them either. Because there's no regulation. There's no FDIC. There's no Security and Exchange Commission. None of that exists. That comes about during the New Deal. So we'll get to that a bit later. The reason I wanted to bring that up, I want us to always look at this type of policy objectively. Think about how policy has impacts down the road, right? So here we have Harding on the left, Coolidge on the right. Any questions there? First Red Scare. Obviously, the Bolshevik Revolution was a success. The theories of Karl Marx, they follow through with those. Vladimir Lenin, Leon Trotsky, Joseph Stalin leads this overthrow of Tsar Nicholas II, and Russia, now the Soviet Union and the Eastern Bloc, are communists. We are very fearful at the end of World War I that communism will spread to the United States. And we know for a fact there are communists amongst us. How? How do we know? What did you say? Does anybody know? How do we know they're amongst us? They are visible in plain sight. Oh, that's a good call. And you're right. You're not wrong. It's actually more simple than you think. They are all part of a very public what? What is that? You guys are on the right path? Party. Thank you. They are all part of a political party, right? They're part of the Communist Party. That's it. I know. How do we know? Yeah, but it was public. Could you imagine, like right now, they'll be like, third party movement, Communist Party, we're doing this. Yeah. The group that was more difficult to track down, anarchists. They were a little more difficult to track down. Because a lot of the anarchists are what? They're pushing for violence, right? So there's this massive roundup led by Wilson's Attorney General A. Mitchell Palmer. And this roundup, led by the Fighting Quakers, he was known, is known as the First Red Scare. These folks are rounded up, deported aboard the Buford to Canada and to Europe. This was called the Soviet Ark. And among them were not only communists, but also anarchists like Emma Goldman and Alexander Berkeley. These two were inspirations to Leon Czolgosz. Czolgosz, what did he do? What did Czolgosz do? I guess you could call it a movement, but it was pretty radical. What did Leon Czolgosz do in Buffalo, New York? Assassination. Good. What assassination? McKinley. Good job. He shot McKinley. And remember, Czolgosz was like, was he remorseful? No. He was blatantly said, I'm glad I did it. He did not plead insanity, none of that. Yeah.
Why do communists and anarchists always feel like
Well, they didn't, it's actually more complex than that. They didn't always see eye to eye. Some of the leading Marxists felt like the anarchists were like a distraction to like their cause, because they had a noble cause. The anarchists had no cause. Does that make sense? That is a good point. That is a great point, because it does get convoluted when you go into the Great Purge and you move into World War II. Excellent. Good point. All right. Let's talk a little bit about Sacco and Vanzetti. These are two Italian anarchists that are convicted for murdering a Massachusetts paymaster and his guard. I don't know if you're familiar with what a paymaster is. It's a lawyer that carries large sums of money. These two are going to be arrested, tried, convicted, and executed. This was highly controversial. A lot of radicals were furious about it. In fact, one of the jurors had a bomb set off at his house as a result of it. So this Red Scare is like a massive anti-foreign nativism. It occurred in Braintree. There's actually a monument in Massachusetts related to it. Yeah. coming on the scene. Yeah, so you've got, we're going to talk a little bit about that later, like, you've got Treasury group, it's kind of like leading the task force for prohibition. You also have J. Edgar Hoover in the Bureau of Investigation, which is the forerunner of the FBI. So they're both like, the task force is like going after prohibition. Hoover's going after like mobsters, but anarchists, spectrum anarchists, all that kind of thing. And that Morrison, good point. Yeah. Yeah, he's coming on the scene at this point as well. We're actually going to talk a little bit about him moving forward. So here we have Sacco and Vanzetti. Vanzetti on the left, Sacco on the right. All right, tragically, we also have the rebirth of the Ku Klux Klan during this era. This gentleman here, William J. Simmons, is going to lead the rebirth at the top of Stone Mountain, Georgia. This rebirth is sadly what would be considered a more equal opportunity hate group, where it's anti-foreign, Catholic, African-American, Jewish, pacifist, communist, internationalist, revolutionist, bootlegger, gambling, adultery, birth control. In fact, their platform created a lot of contradiction, and that led to some unraveling within their ranks leading up to World War II. Their membership reached a level higher than ever before, close to 5 million, which is pretty scary. Ultimately, it all fell apart because of financial corruption. Financial corruption, ideology, and World War II brought it all to a crashing halt. Think about how different their platform was. During this era, the Klan will march on Byrd Park in Richmond. Why do you think they would have marched on Byrd Park? Any ideas? I'll give you a hint. Who said a statue?
My guy, Mike.
Nice. You are correct, sir. It is over a statue. What statue is it over?
Poverty League.
That's on Monument. I'm glad you threw something out there.
That's like the end of it.
Well, there's multiple statues. Arthur Ashe is a really great guess, but that's erected later and it's on Monument. This one's a tricky one. Not American.
It's not an American.
European, yes. But where in Europe?
Germany.
Nope. No.
Great Britain.
No. No. Yes.
Does her name start with a G?
No, it's not on the slide.
That is Italian people.
Nobody?
Columbus.
Columbus. Very good. The statue of Christopher Columbus. Isn't that wild? Because they're anti-Catholic and anti-foreign. Wild? But see, Kathia brings up a really great point that I want to make clear. The history of Columbus that we teach now is very different than what it looked like then, right? They weren't doing this as like a stance for what Columbus had done to Native people.
It was just because he was
Yeah, anti-Catholic, anti-foreign. It's kind of crazy. And how do you think Virginia responded to that? They were not happy. All right, so let's talk about limits on immigration. The Immigration Restriction Act of 1921 and the Immigration Restriction Act of 1924, these are what we would call quota acts, meaning that only a certain percentage from each country could come over and settle in America in a given year. With that being said, what really pushed this is the Bolshevik Revolution. All right, let's hang in here, guys. Thanks. The Bolshevik Revolution pushed this. But this act has a larger impact on what group leading up to World War II. Jewish refugees. Jewish refugees are going to be turned away as a result of this back into the hands of the Nazis. Yes. Let's talk a little bit about prohibition. The banning of alcohol, the Volstead Act. This is one of the most bizarre circumstances and one of the most unpopular laws that was ever passed in the United States. Certainly the most unpopular amendment passed, because another amendment will be passed to repeal this one, the 21st. The 18th Amendment was vetoed. The Volstead Act was vetoed by Wilson. Why do you think Wilson wanted to veto it? Why veto banning alcohol? Why? Yeah, revenue, right? What else? Right, the World War I's over, let's booze it up. And Wilson was not a big drinker. Very pious man. Yeah, Erica's right. It's a lot about revenue. It's also about freedom, right? Yeah, if I want to booze it up, let me booze it up type of idea. Very good. Yeah, I know, let's get the rhetoric going. We didn't die. So, what is nuts about this is that 2/3 of the House and 2/3 of the Senate overturned this veto. That's wild. That is wild. So the law was not really effectively enforced. They tried. And again, didn't really work out because of what Erica said. And what's that? Money. Money, money, money.
Great juice company. Warren.
Yeah, there you go. Some people loved it. William Jennings Bryan, Francis Willard. These are some examples. A lot of bootlegging coming out of Canada, Cuba, Haiti, Ireland during this era. And then you've got a couple of decent things that came out of it. Bank savings increase, domestic violence goes down, but the biggest problem is the loss of tax revenue and rise in crime, and the issue of basic freedom. Organized crime, bootlegging. Y'all know what bootlegging is? Moonshining. You know what that is? Rum running. Rum running is, guys, can we get quiet over there, please? Thanks. Rum running is running alcohol from Cuba and the Caribbean to Florida and other parts of the U.S. That's rum running. Typically by what?
Pirates.
Kinda. Yeah. They were called rum runners. They were kind of like pirates. Exactly. They really were. What's homebrew? Yeah, trying to make your own bathtub gin and hooch. How do you think that turned out? Gross, poisonous, a lot of death, especially with your age group. Do they do that in prison? Yes, they do. Prisoners still make hooch. What is a speakeasy? It's a bar, a legal bar. Good. Prohibition went into effect on July 1st, 1919. Yes, very good. Kathia nailed it. Right before the 4th of July. What's happening on the top left there? What are those guys doing? Is that thanks. Top left, bootleggers. Top right, moonshiners. What's that guy doing? NASCAR. NASCAR is born as a result of this era. So in places like Franklin County, Virginia, the moonshine capital of the world, Halifax County, South Boston, Martinsville, a lot of short tracks in Virginia. That's a tradition. Short dirt tracks were made in Virginia to run these bootlegging cars to race each other. They decide to then take the race to what beach? Not Virginia, not Myrtle, Daytona. Daytona. Very good. Daytona is not the only place they did beach races, but that starts it. All right, the original American gangster. You guys brought up a good point here. There is a Prohibition Task Force. It is connected with the Department of the Treasury. There's also a Bureau of Investigators that is attached to the, it's tied to the, the Bureau of Investigators sort of stands alone. It's the forerunner of the FBI. So guys like Elliot Ness and the Untouchables worked with the Prohibition Task Force. J. Edgar Hoover is going to come on the scene here soon. He's with the Bureau of Investigation, which becomes the Federal Bureau of Investigation. A lot of crime. Over 500 people, roughly 500 people died in this gang violence. Very hard to pin the murders on anybody because people won't roll over on each other. A lot of corruption within the police departments, a lot of political payoffs. And don't let the stereotype of like, oh, all of gangsters were like Italian, Irish, or that wasn't the case. There were Italian gangs, there were Irish gangs, there were Russian gangs. There were people of all walks of life, American gangsters that were getting involved in this. Capone, he's going to be the most infamous of this era. He was responsible for carrying out the St. Valentine's Day massacre in 1929, but he doesn't get caught for the murder. Like, nor do, any of the other crimes that he committed. Internal Revenue got him for tax evasion. And that's what these guys start doing. They start getting hit for tax evasion. Another thing that improves during this era is forensic investigation, right? They start doing everything from like bullet casings to more crime scene investigations during the era. Gangs moved into other activities, prostitution, gambling, narcotics. Billions were made by gangs that were lost in revenue during the era. And really a tipping point in this whole era was when the most famous celebrity in America at this time, Charles Lindbergh, who was the first pilot to successfully fly across the Atlantic, he is going to be, his infant son was kidnapped and killed. And that's going to lead to the Lindbergh Law, and that allowed for the death penalty in interstate abduction cases. So here we have Al Capone. He will die, he'll die in Alcatraz. Yes, syphilis. Yeah. Went crazy. Yeah. Let's talk a little bit about the change in education at this time. This is another renaissance in education. John Dewey, professor at Columbia. Some real awesome principles we use today, like especially in the era of social sciences, especially history classes and political science. The idea of learning by doing, education for life, all coinciding with our inherent need for democracy. Do you have an inherent need for democracy? Wouldn't you? Wouldn't you say? Do you like to have a say in what you do? Yeah. I try to make things democratic in here. Like, hey, who wants the field trip now and then? Let's vote on it. Or early on in the year, hey, what do you want your test to look like? Vote on it, type of thing. Right? So these are the idea that we crave democracy because we want to say in outcomes. So I can subscribe to Dewey's theories. The teaching of Darwin creeping into the classroom, this actually leads to a legit setup, and that is a substitute teacher with a little bit of a background in science is planted in a school in Dayton, Tennessee to teach the theory of evolution. It all falls right, the plan falls together, or comes together perfectly. He's fired, he's arrested, and he's going to go on trial for teaching evolution. It just so happens he is going to be defended by one of the toughest defense attorneys in America at the time, Clarence Darrow. Prosecution is going to, ironically enough, pick up one of Darrow's mentors, William Jennings Bryan, and so begins the debate over evolution. Brian is older at this point, and he gets hit with some literal questions about the Bible, and it doesn't really go well in the courtroom. The trial kind of kills the guy. Just a few days after this trial was inconclusive, and it was widely publicized in newspapers and over radio, Brian will die as a result of this. Another impact of this trial is that suddenly the laws over a period of time start to be loosened on the teaching of the theory of evolution and more scientific and pragmatic principles in schools. Here we have Clarence Darrow on the left, John Scopes. John Scopes, the Scopes trial, a lot of times it's called the monkey trial, because it's the trial about allowing for the teaching of evolution in American schools. The era of the 20s, mass consumption, right? We go from military production back to consumer products, refrigerators, washing machines, radios, automobiles. All those are easily accessible. And you have pretty solid purchasing power. Because you can buy things on what? Credit. You remember the Amazon of the era is what? Sears, right? Or Montgomery Ward. You can buy things on credit. Credit can be dangerous, right? Credit can be a dangerous thing. It's a good thing, but it's a dangerous thing. But it's not just consumer goods that you can buy on credit. You can also buy stocks on credit. Who played the stock market game in here? Okay, Cody, what was your favorite stock?
Alibaba.
Alibaba, that's the first for us. Very good. Alibaba, I'm going to add that to my ticker.
It's a Chinese.
Basically
Chinese Amazon.
Oh, I know. I'm impressed.
Yeah.
What's it trading at right now?
I haven't checked in a while, but like when I first invested in it was like around 250 for stock, and now it was up at 340 last year.
I just added it to my ticker.
Right
So
now,
181. Okay, so 181. So Cody, here's what I'm going to do for you. Let's call it a flat 180. Cody, I'm your broker. I'm going to sell you one share of Alibaba stock for 180, or get this, I will sell you 18 shares at $10 a piece. You just put $10 down. You'll owe me the money later because you're going to get rich. But you also owe me what?
interest.
Interest.
Compounded.
Well, it will be compounded interest if you stay in the market and you do well, but the interest you owe me, I don't know. I don't know if we're gonna put a ceiling or a floor on it. Nevertheless, I'll be real fair with you, we'll call it 5%. But here's the problem, right? You now owe me 90% on 18 stocks and 5% interest. What happens if your stock fails? You not only lost the 10% you put down, you lost the money you don't have, and you lost the interest you owe me. That's dangerous. That's called buying stock on margin. It is illegal. You cannot do it anymore. This was the issue then. Yeah. Yeah, but if you show up to a broker, and right now, if you get into a brokerage or if you buy stock, they're going to say, I want a certified check. You're not going to be able to float it on a credit card or anything like that. You are going to have a certified check, and you're going to hand it over to John Q. Broker, and he's going to take that, and it's going to take 3 days to process. You know what I'm saying?
I'll just say, like, I know especially brokerages allow day trading, they can match your investment.
Yeah, but still, I mean, even your investment has to be concrete. You can't be like, oh, hey, I'm gonna float me the 70%.
Yeah.
I'm good for it. This is not. It doesn't happen anymore because of this. You know.
I was thinking about Chipotle.
Chipotle.
Yeah.
What's Chipotle selling at?
I don't know.
Like $10 or something?
No.
Is it conglomerate?
320.
320?
Yeah, but at one point it was at like 370. Like I invested it when it dropped from movie with like the whole stock market crash.
Alibaba and Chipotle are two different bears, I'll tell you that much.
Yeah, well, because I made a lot of money. I made a ludicrous amount of money off both of them. So like, I
Just
don't-
lost it all in translation. It's all good. So, again, this is the era in which we see set selling. How many of you guys feel like there's ads that target you using sex appeal?
They're pretty limited.
That's a little aggressive. Talking about selling. Enough of your Google searches, Cody. What are your? Give me a product example. What? Okay. That's also like you're really sort of jumping in the water there. I know. I'm talking about like that's not Viagra is not targeting. Hardy. I think they got rid of that ad campaign.
Yeah, they
But you know, like what targets your generation that's using sex? Tide Pod. All right. So I like the old Hardy's campaign. I think that's done, right? They got away from that. Yeah. What's that? Yeah. Target. Yeah. Target's pretty low key. Let me grab that password.
What's the Super Bowl commercial where it's like a hot girl like hanging out with a
So, how about perfume, Old Spice, Axe, all that is what I'm looking for. So check it out. Hey, guys, hang in there. All right, this is the beginning of that. Yeah, how's your breath today? If it's bad, you won't be welcome. Play safe, use Listerine. Who is this targeting? Is it?
Oh, everybody?
Everybody, yeah. This is targeting everybody. And I think about my grandparents when I was growing up. They had like massive bottles of Listerine under their sink. Maybe these ads, no, I'm serious. Like maybe these ads when they were teenagers, they're like, you know what, we do need Listerine. The American vehicle. Guys, check it out. Mass production. Henry Ford, Ransom Olds, the Dodge brothers, Daimler Chrysler, GM. They're taking everybody out, like the Klein Car Company here in Richmond, because of assembly line production. This is a staggering statistic. 85% of vehicles globally were produced in America during this era. Millions of people were driving, new jobs were created, new tycoon empires. Guardian Glass, Goodyear Rubber, the list goes on and on. The American automobile revolutionizes the American economy during this era. No longer is a car a luxury, it becomes a what? Necessity, and it has a lot of other impacts. It bypasses the train. It bypasses the horse and buggy. It bypasses trolley cars. Hence the reason we don't have trolley cars in Richmond anymore. It also expands something that I don't know if you realize. It expanded city police forces. The Richmond City Police Force, before the production of the automobile, was about as big as the group in this room. The entire city police force. This is it. This is us. We're the whole police force. Automobiles change that, okay? So here we have an Oldsmobile ad on the left, meeting the trials of months and miles. And then on the right, cut your costs, buy a Ford. That's Henry Ford. American aviation, this is an insane advancement from the flight in Kitty Hawk in 1903 with the Wright brothers to the end of World War I. In less than a 20-year period, aviation really advances. On the top right there, we have Eddie Rickenbacker. He's like our flying ace. He's the first American pilot to win the Medal of Honor. It's kind of like our Red Baron from World War I. Have you ever heard of Eddie Rickenbacker? Oh, good. All right, cool. All right. He's the German ace, yeah, in World War I. In the middle there, that's Lucky Lindy. That's Charles Lindbergh. He flew the Spirit of St. Louis from New York to Paris. There's Amelia Earhart. She is the first female. She actually breaks pretty much every record for a woman during this era. Altitude, transatlantic flight. She did her transatlantic flight from Newfoundland to Ireland in like under 16 hours or something. Yeah.
You know they actually found her bones on international waters.
Yes. We'll talk a bit about that when we get into World War II. Yeah, good point. Do keep in mind our first transatlantic flight is from New York to San Francisco in 1920. The Curtiss JN-4 Jenny was the plane. We also start sending mail and consumer products via air. American radio was huge during this era. KDKA out of Pittsburgh, their first radio report was the victory of Warren G. Harding over James M. Cox in the election of 1920. The automobile and people at home, people in automobiles and people at home wanted to listen to shows, so Amos and Andy was a comedy show. The Ever Ready Hour was kind of like a variety show. Does anybody out there listen to Prairie Home Companion on NPR? It's kind of like that. It's like this sort of it's kind of like a variety show. Music, skits, comedy, a little bit of everything. Soap opera, commercials. Sports are huge on radio. Two sports really grow as a result of radio: baseball and boxing. Babe Ruth becomes a household name. The era of the American celebrity is born because of the radio and because of film. Top left, Babe Ruth. That right there is KDKA. That is our first American radio station. That's in Pittsburgh. All right, this is where we pump the brakes today. Tinseltown, Hollywood. Why Hollywood? Why are you going to film there? It's on the West Coast. You got beaches. You got mountains. You got deserts. You got fields. You guys are helping me out here. What do all those, well, you eventually will have people. What do all those things provide you as a filmmaker? Different types of sets. Thank you. Awesome. There's something that will bring the people, as Hunter pointed out, and that guy's hanging here with me, and that is a guy by the name of William Mulholland. You've all heard of Mulholland Drive, right? No? Please? Thank you. All right? The line of palm trees in LA, Mulholland Drive. William Mulholland was an immigrant from Belfast. What he does is he brings the aqueduct, he builds the aqueduct to Los Angeles. What is an aqueduct? Yeah, it provides the water supply of Los Angeles. None of this can happen without it. All right? So people start heading out west. Hollywood and filmmaking becomes big. Keep in mind the first American film was The Great Train Robbery. Do note that the French beat us to the punch.
Yeah, I can't remember his name.
Yeah, Roundhay Garden Scene is the first film.
Yeah, but I can't remember the name.
The director.
The man that made the first
Film.
film.
In France.
Yeah.
Yeah.
It's French.
He is French. We'll have to take a look at that.
Albert Pinton, I don't know.
We'll take a look. I do know one of our earliest American filmmakers was Edison. He was hired by TR.
And there was a case where the French guy, his family, after he disappeared, they were suing Edison because they
Aha.
said they thought Edison kind of killed them too.
Wow. Check that out. It's awesome.
They lost it because the guy, the French guy, had a patent on a lens called 16 lens instead of a 1 lens. Nice.
That's cool.
It was on BuzzFeed.
Nice. Could you find that and share it with me? I would love that. I appreciate that. Like, check that out. The first full-length American film, D.W. Griffith's Birth of the Nation. We talked about this before, a very bizarre film. Silent film that glorified the Klan and the Reconstruction era. Charlie Chaplin's first full-length feature comedy, The Kid, came out in 1921. The first talkie, moving from the silent films to talking films. The Jazz Singer with Al Jolson. Again, the climate, the landscape is a big reason why Hollywood grows. Do keep in mind early horror films. I don't know if I've got any horror film folks out there. Do I have any vampire film fans out there? Nobody? A little bit? The earliest horror movies were called vamps, and there was a lot of like risque activity in these films, a lot of nudity. This led to early censorship in American film.
Oh, I found it.
Sweet. Yeah, just forward it to my email, please. A lot of these films, though, have been lost. Any idea why? Okay. A lot of the films were burned, but do you realize that not all the films that were burned on purpose? A lot of them caught fire, like film, and they didn't make copies. Really, really good job, Erica. There's another problem, too, that these films suffer from. Improper what? Yeah, improper storage. Yeah, they were completely ruined because they weren't properly stored. A lot of propaganda movies from the World War I era boosted the popularity of movies like The Kaiser and The Beast of Berlin. So, again, this becomes big business, this new medium. Movies become really popular. Why do we watch movies? Okay? Air conditioning. I like that. That is a reason why a lot of people did go to the movie theater then and maybe even now.
That's what she said.
She's right. That is right. A lot of people would duck into theaters for AC. This is when the time when air conditioning was coming about. Why do you watch movies?
I like to be entertained.
You like to be entertained. Right? How does anybody watch movies for an escape? Just from life, from the news cycle, from everything. What's that? So, just 5 of us watch movies for escape? I think all of us can get behind that. All of us have watched a movie and been like, I don't want to think. Entertain me. Yeah. Netflix and zone out, right? All right. Hollywoodland. What is Hollywoodland? It's Hollywood. Do you know why it was called Hollywoodland? It was, but it feels like a theme park, but it's actually just a real estate development. The sign fell out of repair. They dropped the land off it, and they kept the integrity of the Hollywood sign, and now it's iconic. And now it's Hollywood. All right, so questions? Yes, you can. Any other questions out there? All right, let's take a breather. Let's pump the brakes.